I don't actually think it's impossible now if the Traveler just, well, maybe isn't a real person? Again, he's like the most tragic character this game has ever had. And that's saying a lot, because this game's like super melancholic. How much does the truth matter? And what does it even mean for something to matter? And what does it mean when you haven't subscribed to me after watching multiple videos? Let's talk about the Genshin main story quest entitled Bedtime Story. I haven't talked about Genshin's main story on here recently, so let me do a quick catch up on how I've felt about the recent story. I thought Sumeru had some hiccups, primarily in some of its character usage and pacing, but it was overall a huge step forward to me with the main plot. And honestly, the same is true for Fontaine. I think at this point, Fontaine might be my favorite arc, even though it similarly has those same issues. But I do think since Sumeru, Genshin has really found its footing story-wise, to where I can say that the main story has yet to release something I genuinely dislike. When I talk about stories, I'm sure it can seem like I often choose ones that I dislike, but I tend to make more videos on things that I have problems with because there's generally a larger point I can make about storytelling techniques as a whole. It's much easier to look at something that doesn't work, explain why, and then offer a solution than it is to look at something that does work and then explain why. Those pieces of media from me often turn into more introspective, philosophical thought pieces, like my video on the event quest with Fremine. But with as much criticism as I levy against these games sometimes, I probably should gush a bit when I like something. So I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna talk so much about why I love this quest, but there are also some things I'm still not super sure about. So I've always gotta be a little bit of a bitch. Also, make sure you tell me what you thought about the quest, not only for the algorithm, but also I'm thinking about maybe making something with your guys' comments, so let me know. So our quest begins with the Traveler being commissioned with an issue that the guild literally feels like they can only accomplish. Because the Traveler is basically the guild's MVP at this point, they bring them in where other people continue to fail. And honestly, fair. This game has been going on for, well, a long time, and we've been tasked with so much from the guild that it really does make sense that we're basically the only ones who are the most reliable at actually solving things. But it also does make me think about the guild as a whole, though. We haven't really had many characters outside of Mondstadt who have large connections to the guild, which I find a little strange because the world really is so large, but since it's been so long, I can definitely accept that we probably are still the best at solving random odd jobs. The commission is to find a missing person, so the Traveler and Paimon go to a village and begin asking around. They chat with some people, and the people are avid about wanting to find them, but outside of that person's age and gender, they really don't remember specifics about them, but they do remember what he did for them, how he made them feel, and how much of a selfless person he was. They meet a woman named Atosa, who was brought to the village at an early age and never really got to gel with anyone there. She always felt othered, and it was hard for her to make friends, but the man who went missing would always talk with her, and essentially, he became her one true friend. So the mystery has been set, and it's pretty cool. I mean, the game has been toying around with pretty crazy concepts, like memory stuff and deleting yourself from the world and women holding positions of power. What the fuck? So when this came up, it was nice to see the Travelers specifically mention that this might be another similar case. It's nice to see when characters like aren't dumb, and we didn't really even get crazy dumb questions from Paimon in this chapter either, which is nice. With all that our characters have been through, they really should be extremely competent now. So it turns out the Abyss are involved here, and with the Abyss comes with it Dainsleif. The pair meet up with him, and they have a lot of questions of their own to ask him. I mean, the last time they saw him, the Traveler got stuck in a memory of their siblings, and then he skedaddled, like he always does. So let's do a little refresher about Daaaane as well. I want to say this up front. I like Daaaane. I think he's an interesting character, and that's certainly great because he's basically been around for the entire lifespan of this game, and is like one of the 3 characters that we know is very important to the main story. But there is a good and a bad about his character. Whenever he shows up, we get main plot reveals, which, hey, I love main plot reveals. Don't go for me. But B, it's kind of a bit funny at this point that every time we see him, he sorta has a, oh yeah, by the way, let me tell you one more thing. Like the reveal about the 5 sinners here, that there were 5 people who divided up godlike powers from Conria, and one of them was Daaane's brother. It's a cool idea, but at the same time, it's like not been hinted at all. At least the Daaaane and his brother's connection has it. I don't feel like that was set up in a way where it was more of an aha moment here than it was a, wait, you have a brother? And look, I don't expect Daaaane to just tell us everything about his life, but like, at least allude to these things before they're revealed. I don't know, maybe it's just a pet peeve for me here. I think the only thing I'm still not a fan of is how a lot of the reveals in this game are treated. Just kind of saying the 5 sinners thing here is one of the least interesting ways this information could have been revealed. At least have Daaaane reveal this information to us in I don't know, distress or an interesting way or when it's extremely relevant, not just kind of hanging out in town. But back to things I liked, I promise. I really do enjoy the idea of the 5 sinners. It's an interesting little Easter egg hunt for players who are paying attention, and it's further layer peeling of what happened with Conria. Also, Rhine daughter being one of them has to mean that Albedo is going to end up becoming important to the main plot, right? They even name drop him here. So it would be weird to not inevitably get a main story mission with Albedo in it rather than just getting another event quest. So we wake up the next morning and Daaaane says he's got new memories now? They're of him giving the eye of the first field tiller to the man who disappeared. The crew figures out that the guy can manipulate the memories of others, and so they head to see if the eye of the first field tiller is still okay. The Traveler thinks that it might be a trap, but knows that Daaaane has to have already thought of this too, so they go along to the place that supposedly has it. Adding a memory like that would only make sense for a trap, but it also does bring up another question. How does Daaaane know that these are fake memories? I mean, wouldn't fake memories seem almost as real memories? Later on, they learn that all of the fake memories take place at the same time of day, but that's so as to not cause suspicion of the memories themselves. I think you could say that Daaaane is just more perceptive to that type of manipulation, maybe, but then later he believes the fake memories of him handing the eye of the field tiller to the Traveler. Spoilers, but Daaaane had the eye on him the whole time, and he gets it stolen later by the sibling because he was implanted a false memory of him handing the eye to the Traveler before they left their fake hiding spot. So I'm sure someone could say that the first time, when he was implanted the first fake memory, he was able to tell that the memories of handing the eye over to the guy were fake because he had it on him the whole time. But then, wouldn't he also be able to know he never handed it over to the Traveler because he also had to have had it on his person at the time too? It's a bit of a weird inconsistency, but moving on. The Traveler and Paimon leave Daaaane and end up in a fake memory. They quickly figure out that, well, they're in a memory because the time is stopped here and can't move past dusk. They come into contact with the man manipulating memories, and it turns out it's Caribert. That's right, the hilly churl death child from the quest from a year ago at this point. See, now this is a great reveal. At the end of the Caribert quest, we don't really get to see what happens to him or his father. It all comes to a head and it gets real tragic, and then we wake up. Seeing him here brings up so many questions, and he begins to answer them for the Traveler. Turns out he exists solely to allow the Loom of Fate operation to begin and for it to be created. The Loom of Fate is something the game really hammered on early with the initial Daaaane quest, but had just been looming in the background ever since. We're still not sure what its purpose is, but Caribert says that the Loom of Fate is quite literally a loom, as it can weave new ley lines into the world. We already know that ley lines are heavily tied to memories and the truth of the world. Almost all of the Sumeru chapter is tied to that idea, so this concept of adding new strands brings up another heap of questions. I'm guessing they might go by Doctor Who logic here, since Caribert mentions that the current ley lines that already exist in the world can't be tampered with by the Loom of Fate. So I guess this means that there are fixed moments in Teyvat's history that simply cannot be undone. But it begs the question, what are the Abyss really trying to do then? It can also lead to some really fun and wild theories. I've spoken before about how the Traveler's past has just kind of been swept under the rug. We know they supposedly traveled with their sibling, but we get almost no more details than that. And we know that they're from off-world, but from where, we're not really sure. I don't actually think it's impossible now if the Traveler just, well, maybe isn't a real person? We've been told by Nahida earlier that our sibling isn't a descender, and that a descender is someone supposedly from off-world. But what if off-world just clearly means not tied to the original one? The assumption is that those not found in the leyline nexus tied to Teyvat aren't from Teyvat. But what if the Loom of Fate operation already did succeed? And with it, it created the Traveler, and the others who were born into Teyvat for a purpose that we've yet to know. Even if this isn't the case, we know now that memories absolutely can be tampered with, and while Caribert had limitations, who's to say that if someone were to be created by the Loom of Fate, that they aren't given false memories to do so tied to that loom. I also don't think it's impossible that we're in a sort of memory loop too, that Teyvat goes through the same history events up to a point, and maybe the loom is meant to challenge that particular point. We've already seen the Traveler and Paimon exist in a memory here, so what if all of Teyvat is just one big memory? Just wondering out loud at this point, but there's absolutely something going on here that will be revealed and lead to an absolutely insane and massive aha moment. I just hope it isn't revealed in some random fucking dialogue next to a hill or something. After this reveal though, we learn that Caribert implanted fake memories into the townspeople because he wanted to know what it was like to live normally for once, since he was never allowed that chance in his real life. Right now, he's just a consciousness, and so that's the only way he can really live. And this was yet another great reveal. The second he said the memories were fake for the purpose of living a life, it really elicits a lot of emotions. I mean, from the second that we met Atosa, we learned that Caribert was basically the only person in her life that she had a connection to. Well, was it wrong then for Caribert to implant those memories if she could never actually meet him again in the present? Is it better to have loved and lost than to have not loved at all? Is it better to subscribe right now than to not? Did you think I forgot? This whole thing is also just like, it's super tragic. Within 2 story quests, we've gotten this story of Caribert and what sparked the creation of the Abyss Order, and honestly, it's fantastic. I personally think that this quest and the last Caribert quest are really gonna hold up as the game moves on. As more and more reveals happen related to the Abyss or the Loom of Fate, they'll always elicit thoughts about Caribert, and I think that that is great. I always talk about personalizing stories in different ways, and that's why I care about characters so much. Stories shouldn't just be a collection of lore smashed into one timeline, but rather they should be attached to characters, because without characters in your game's lore and world, everything feels lifeless. And for the little time that Caribert was given, I think he left a massive impact on the game. My fucking god. And speaking of time, can we talk about how relatively short this quest was? I'm glad that Genshin has decided to move away from multi-hour epics and instead just actually give us more vignette-like stories that feel like short stories. Like I said, we have all of Caribert's life here, and in the last quest and both quests felt paced very well, and together even more so. Like, I'm okay with having the chapters being longer, like, don't get me wrong, but Hoyoverse has gotten into traps of making some of their stories undeniably too long. Looking at you, a recent chapter of fucking Penacony's story that was like 10 hours long. Holy shit. This thing can go overboard really quickly. So I appreciate when they feel more focused, like this chapter did. It had a small cast, some supporting characters, and told a concise story, all within the span of like an hour and a half. That also means that most players will experience this quest in one sitting, meaning the reveals are going to hit way harder than if they had to play your story over the span of like, I don't know, fucking 2 weeks or something. Caribert says that the Loom of Fate has been completed. Daaaane comes into contact with a sibling, as that was his plan all along, and they fight. But Daaaane hesitates because he still cares, and he loses the battle. The sibling now has the eye, and with it, the Loom has been completed. When the Loom is completed, we learn that there's no longer anything keeping Caribert tethered to the world, so he fades away. Again, he's like the most tragic character this game has ever had. And that's saying a lot, because this game's like super melancholic. His final act, though, with all the power that he had, was to just give the Hilly Churls one moment of peace. To do to them what his father gave him when he learned he was a monster. To tell them it was just a story, so that they could have a final moment of peace in their lives. This entire quest touches on the central ideas of storytelling and memory, how the two are essentially interconnected. People are what they believe to be true. So does a false memory make the truth any less impactful? So the siblings finally get a conversation, like the first one we've literally ever seen of just the two alone. And in it, we get some really great character moments. The sibling says that, well, ever since the fall of Conria, the Heavenly Principles haven't said a damn peep, that they've been asleep, effectively, that even after everything that happened with the destruction of the Hydra Archon's throne, they still didn't respond, which is a really interesting concept. I personally think that after Natlin and Snezhnaya, we will get Celestia, but now I'm not too sure what that will even be. Like I said before, what if the Loom of Fate operation worked, and as a result, the gods are just gone now? I'm not sure, but it's definitely a really fun mystery that brings into question pretty much everything that's happened so far, and again, what the Heavenly Principles even are. This quest, as well as pretty much everything with the Hilly Churls, has managed to really humanize the Abyss's plight and really bring into question how bad they really are. Like the Fatui, I really believe that this game has yet to introduce a true evil faction, other than maybe Celestia, which I enjoy. It does beg the question though of like, who are we gonna really be fighting against at the end of the Teyvat chapter of this game's story? At this point, it seems to be setting up maybe a fight with Daane's brother, so I'd really like to start learning and even seeing more of him. I'm personally more inclined towards villains who we see and know before they inevitably become the big bad, but that's a little far out at this point, I guess, so I think there's still time for a great reveal that will result in a fantastic fight at the end of the Teyvat chapter, before we inevitably move on to some other world or whatever the hell they have planned after, because there's not a shot that this game ends in like 3 years. Look how much money he's making. Ever since learning that his sibling was leading the Abyss, the Traveler has shown a bit of skepticism towards them, which I like. They're not immediately trusting of the sibling because it really has been a long time since they last saw them, and even longer since the sibling saw them because of the whole awakening shenanigans. Yet another sign that maybe one of them might not be real, but I digress. Anyway, with all the skepticism, the Traveler still just wants to sit down and take in the moment. They finally got to see their sibling again, the whole reason this journey started to begin with, and so they just want to have a conversation. And while I can see some players being a little annoyed with the line about how they just had questions but they don't care about him anymore, I loved it. The Traveler really is an actual character. They're not supposed to be us. So following them and having them have such a human moment like this is fantastic. This is a lot more in one line than most gacha games say in like 7 hours. Looking at you, wuthering waves.
Acid fields, etheric sea, retroact rain, and gravity loss.
The Traveler does ask one question though, which is why they can't continue their journey across the stars together. The sibling says that at the end of their journey through Teyvat, they arrived at a place known as the Sea of Flowers at the end. The Traveler had apparently previously told the sibling that they wanted to find a place where a specific flower from another world was in full bloom, and it turns out that place was here, which just like clearly brings up another batch of questions, and this is clearly something that is setting up a huge reveal, and the Traveler might have also figured it out here based on their response. I mean, in the initial trailer for this game's story, the two of them are standing in a flower bed together. Also, post-editing me, but I went back and watched that beginning story video that Genshin released like 3 years ago and completely forgot about this final bit right here. I might make an entire video just about this, but I feel like this confirms the idea that Aether is like, I don't know, a fake person or something. It's mentioned here by Daaaane that Aether can be the one to weave fate, which is an obvious allusion now to the Loom of Fate operation and adding ley lines to the world. He also says here that you can be the one to save her, which I feel like this trailer is making it out to be Lumine, but I also think it's equally possible that this is about Paimon as well, as I also think Paimon is a created being, she's not real. But again, I feel like this is all for another video, which I do need to make. You'll probably see it in like, I don't know, like in 8 months, I don't know. It'd take too long. Regardless, it's another interesting plot point that I think will lead to a great reveal. So their convo has to come to a quick close as the sibling tells the Traveler that they won't remember this conversation, as it happened in the remnants of Caribert's consciousness, and well, he's gone now. So they have to say their goodbyes quickly, only to have them clearly say something that we can't hear, but I feel like we'll absolutely learn that later, and the Traveler wakes up. That's basically the whole quest, as we end with them learning that the townspeople remember Caribert's name, and Atosa is happy to have known Caribert at all, saying that she actually saw him leave with what she assumed was his parents, which... God. Atosa clearly shows us that even though her time with Caribert wasn't technically real, the memories that it gave her affected her in real ways. I think this concept will be crucial for the game's overarching story moving forward. Like I said previously, there's something going on with the Traveler. Either their existence or their memories are being tampered with, or they're fake or something. Maybe even their relationship with their sibling isn't necessarily real. But I think in the end, this won't end up being what matters. What's true might not be what matters, but rather the lasting impact that stories leave on the people of Teyvat. It's also not a coincidence then that each Archon mission has hit on this aspect of untruths or stories or theater or belief. The entire core of this game is centered on these ideas, and I think this quest hits on them better than most. So this quest hit every box for me. It was paced well, had great character moments, had some fun reveals and questions added to the main plot, and was thematically dense with ideas that I think on a rewatch, when this game is further on, will only age better with time. So I don't really know what ratings to give Genshin Story, so I don't know. I guess the highest one, whatever that is. But I want to thank my patrons for making this video possible. Thank you guys so much. You're the best. And for everybody who made it to the end of this video, for doing so, this time, you guys get a huge, large,